There is a man standing in a throne room. He has no title, no army, no letter of introduction from any king. He is from Gilead, hill country, rough country, the kind of place people leave rather than remember. His name is Elijah, and he has walked into the most powerful palace in the northern kingdom of Israel to say one sentence to the most dangerous man alive. He says, "There will be no dew, no rain, until I say so." And then he walks out. That is how the story of Elijah begins. Not with a vision, not with a burning bush, or a still night voice, or an angel with a scroll. It begins with a man and a sentence, and the sky closes. The name Elijah, in Hebrew, means "My God is the Lord." Every miracle that follows is an answer to that claim. By the time you reach the end of his story, you will understand that the miracles of Elijah are not just displays of divine power. They are arguments. Each one is God making a case against Baal, against fear, against despair, against death itself. We are going to walk through every one of them. Stay with me. Ahab was not a small villain. The historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, described him as a man who outdid every king before him in wickedness. His wife Jezebel was a Phoenician princess who had imported the worship of Baal into Israel the way a conqueror imports a flag. There were now 450 prophets of Baal eating at the royal table. The altars of the Lord had been torn down. The prophets of God were either dead or hiding in caves. Into this world, God sends one man. No army, no political backing, no institutional support, just Elijah and the word the Lord had put in his mouth. After his declaration before Ahab, God tells Elijah to hide. He is sent to a ravine called Kerith, east of the Jordan, where a brook still runs. And God says, "I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." Ravens. You might expect an angel. You might expect a caravan of provisions or a miraculous storehouse. God sends ravens. Unclean birds in the Jewish law. Scavengers, the kind of bird that circles a battlefield and eats what the soldiers leave behind. Twice a day, they come. Bread and meat, every morning, every evening. In a drought, in a ravine, in hiding, and the birds arrive on schedule. This is the first miracle of Elijah. And what it says is this: God is not limited to clean instruments. When he decides to provide, he will use whatever he chooses. The brook eventually dries up. There is no rain. Elijah declared it himself. So God redirects him north. Go to Zarephath in Sidon, he says. There is a widow there. I have commanded her to feed you. Here's what most people miss. Zarephath is not in Israel. It is in Sidon, Phoenicia, the very homeland of Jezebel. God is sending his prophet not away from the land of Baal, but directly into it. And the woman he sends him to is a widow at the end of her resources. When Elijah arrives, she is gathering sticks. She tells him plainly, "I have one handful of flour, a little oil, and then my son and I will eat our last meal and wait to die." No drama, no self-pity, just the arithmetic of a woman who has counted what she has left and found it is not enough. Elijah asks her to make him a small cake first before she makes anything for herself or her son. This is an audacious request, but he attaches a promise: the jar of flour will not run out, and the jug of oil will not run empty until the day the Lord sends rain on the earth. She does it. The jar never empties. The jug never runs dry. Every morning she reaches in and finds more, day after day, through the whole length of the drought. A widow in Sidon, in the heartland of Baal and God, feeds her through the miracle of multiplication. But then the boy gets sick. He gets worse. He stops breathing. The widow turns on Elijah with the raw, grief-stricken logic of a mother who has been holding on to hope and now watches it break. "Did you come here to remind God of my sin? Did you come to kill my son?" Elijah takes the boy. He carries him up to the upper room. He lays him on the bed and cries out to God, stretching himself over the child's body. "Let this boy's life return to him." It does. The boy breathes. Elijah carries him back down and hands him to his mother. This is the first resurrection in the Bible. Not in Jerusalem, not at a temple. In a pagan widow's house, in Phoenicia, in a drought, performed by a man alone in an upper room with nothing but his voice and his God. 3.5 years pass. Think about what that means in an agricultural society. Animals die, crops fail, wells go dry. The land becomes a list of things that used to grow there. And God tells Elijah, "Go back to Ahab. It is time." When Ahab sees him coming, his first words are, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Elijah does not flinch. He says, "I have not troubled Israel, you have. You and your father's house, because you abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals." And then he calls for a gathering on Mount Carmel. 450 prophets of Baal on one side, one man on the other, all of Israel watching from the slopes. Elijah stands before the people and asks them a question that cuts through everything. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. The text says the people did not answer him a word, not one word. There is something devastating in that silence. These are not enemies of God. These are his people. They know the history, the Exodus, the manna, the Jordan, and they are standing there, silent, because they have tried to hold both things at once for so long it has hollowed them out. Elijah proposes a test: 2 bulls, 2 altars. The prophets of Baal will call on their God. He will call on the Lord, the God who answers by fire. That is the true God. The people say, "What you say is good," and it begins. The prophets of Baal start in the morning. They call out, they dance, they cut themselves with swords and spears until blood flows. They shout louder, they add intensity, they perform with everything they have. Nothing. And at noon, this is the part you do not want to miss. Elijah begins to mock them. He says, "Shout louder. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought. Perhaps he is traveling. Perhaps he is sleeping and must be awakened." There is sharp, unforgiving humor here. Elijah is not afraid of these men. He knows what they are calling on, and he knows what they will receive. And it gets stranger. They shout and cut themselves all afternoon, right up until the evening sacrifice. No voice, no response. No one answers. Now it is Elijah's turn. He calls the people close. He takes 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel, and rebuilds the broken altar of the Lord. He digs a trench around it. He arranges the wood, lays the offering on it, and then he tells them to fill 4 large jars with water and pour it over everything. They do. He says, "Do it again." They do. He says, "Do it a 3rd time." 12 jars of water in a 3.5-year drought. Water poured over wood, over stone, until the trench fills. Elijah steps forward and prays one prayer. No dancing, no shouting, no ritual, one prayer. He asks God to let it be known that he is the Lord, and that Elijah has done all of this at his word. Then fire falls. The fire of the Lord consumes the offering, the wood, the stones, the dust, and licks up the water in the trench. The people fall on their faces. They cry out, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." After the confrontation, Elijah climbs to the top of Carmel. He crouches down, face between his knees, and tells his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." 7 times he sends him. On the 7th, the servant returns. There is a cloud, small as a man's hand, rising from the sea. Elijah says, "Go tell Ahab to prepare his chariot before the rain stops him." And the sky breaks open. The drought that Elijah called with a word ended with a prayer. 3.5 years, and the rain comes. And then Elijah runs. This is the part people find most surprising. The man who stood alone against 450 prophets, that man, within 24 hours, is fleeing for his life. Jezebel sends him a message. "By this time tomorrow, you will be as dead as the prophets you killed." And something in Elijah breaks. He runs south, into the wilderness. He leaves his servant behind and walks alone into the desert until he sits down under a juniper tree. And he prays the most human prayer in the entire narrative. He says, "It is enough. Take my life. I am no better than my fathers." And he lies down to sleep. Pay attention to what happens next. No rebuke comes. God does not remind him of Carmel. He does not produce a speech about perseverance. What comes is simpler than any of that. An angel touches him. Not a vision, not a thunderclap, a touch. And the angel says, "Arise and eat." Elijah opens his eyes. There is a cake baked on hot coals beside him. A jar of water. He eats, he drinks, he lies back down. The angel comes again, touches him again, and says, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." 2 touches, 2 meals. In the wilderness, under a tree, to a man who just asked God to let him die. This is a miracle so quiet it barely feels like one. No fire, no spectacular intervention. Just food, and rest, and those words. The journey is too great for you. God does not shame his exhausted prophet. He feeds him. Elijah travels 40 days on the strength of that food. He comes to Horeb, the mountain where Moses received the law, where God passed by before a whole generation. He finds a cave and spends the night. And the Lord asks, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah answers with raw truth, "I alone am left, and they seek my life." God tells him to go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. A great wind comes so powerful it tears the mountains apart, breaks the rocks in pieces. But the Lord is not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord is not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire. But the Lord is not in the fire. And after the fire, call demamah daqah. 3 words in Hebrew. Literally, the sound of thin silence. Some translations say still small voice. Some say gentle whisper. But the Hebrew is stranger than any of those. The sound that silence makes when it has a voice. Elijah hears it. He wraps his face in his cloak, the gesture of reverence Moses used on this same mountain, and he stands at the entrance of the cave. The voice speaks. This is the miracle most people overlook. The man who called down fire and rain, who raised the dead, the miracle that breaks him open, is not fire. It is not earthquake. It is not the spectacular. It is the thin silence. The whisper. And this is where the story bends toward you. If you have ever waited on God in a season that felt like a drought, if you have ever been the person under the juniper tree asking for it to be over, you know that what you needed was not more information. You did not need a theology lecture or a list of reasons to keep going. You needed someone to touch you on the shoulder and say, "The journey is too great for you. Eat. Rest." I know. Near the end of Elijah's life, he and his successor Elisha walk together toward the Jordan River. Elijah knows what is coming. Elisha knows too, and Elisha will not leave his side. At the bank, Elijah takes his mantle, the cloak that has been the symbol of his entire ministry, and rolls it up. He strikes the water. The Jordan parts. The 2 men cross on dry ground. On the other side, Elijah asks Elisha, "What can I do for you before I am taken?" Elisha asks for a double portion of Elijah's spirit, the request of a son to a father. And then a chariot of fire and horses of fire appear between them. A whirlwind takes Elijah up. Elisha watches, crying out, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." Elijah does not die. He is taken. In all of the Old Testament, only 2 men are translated directly into the presence of God without passing through death. Enoch walked with God, and he was not. And Elijah goes up in a whirlwind, in fire, to a place the text does not name. So here are the 3 things the miracles of Elijah leave you with. First, God works through what is available, not what is impressive. Ravens, a widow's last jar of flour, a cake on coals in a desert. The miracles of Elijah follow a pattern of God, taking exactly what is present, even the nearly empty, even the unclean, and making it enough. Second, the fire is real, but so is the exhaustion. Elijah called down fire on Carmel and collapsed under a tree the next day. This is not a contradiction. It is the truth of what it means to walk with God in a world that is still broken. The same man who prayed and saw heaven answer lay under a juniper tree and asked to die. If you have felt that, if you have had your Carmel and then your juniper tree, you are in better company than you know. And third, the miracles of Elijah are not primarily about Elijah. They are about the question he kept answering with his life. The question Ahab asked in contempt. The question Jezebel answered with 450 imported prophets. The question the people could not answer on the slopes of Carmel until the fire fell. Who is God? Not Baal. Not a statue. Not a comfortable cultural religion that asks nothing and promises ease. The Lord, he is God. That is the answer Elijah lived. That is the answer the ravens understood before the prophets did. That is the answer that fell from heaven as fire, and fell from heaven as silence, and the silence was louder. If you are carrying something today that feels too heavy, if the drought in your life has gone on longer than you thought you could endure, then Elijah's story is for you. Not because God promises fire every time, but because he sent an angel to a man under a tree. And the angel said, "Eat. The journey is too great for you." And by the strength of that bread, the man got up. He went all the way to the mountain, and God was there.